knocked in the head of a barrel of soda crackers, and cut some cheese. "Everybody come right forward and make merry. God, it's my treat." Jody gave one of his big he-he laughs and stood back. Janie dipped up the lemonade like he told her, a big tin cupful for everybody. Tony Taylor felt so good when it was all gone that he felt to make a speech. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've come together and gathered here to welcome to our midst one who has seen fit to cast in his lot amongst us. He didn't just come himself, neither. He have seen fit to bring his, the light of his home, that is his wife, amongst us also. She couldn't look no more better and no nobler if she was the Queen of England. It's a pleasure for her to be here amongst us. Brother Starks, we welcome you and all that you have seen fit to bring amongst us. Your beloved wife, your stall, your lamb." A big-mouthed burst of laughter cut him short. "That'll do, Tony," Lige Moss yelled out. "Mr. Starks is a smart man. We's all willing to acknowledge to that. But the day he come wagging down the road with 200 acres of land over his shoulders, I wants to be there to see it." Another big blowout of a laugh. Tony was a little peeved at having the one speech of his lifetime ruined like that. "All y'all know what was meant. I don't see how come." "'Cause you jump up to make speeches and don't know how," Lige said. "I was speaking just all right before you stuck your bill in." "No, you wasn't, Tony. You way out of jurisdiction. You can't welcome a man and his wife without you make comparisons about Isaac and Rebecca at the well, else it don't show the love between them if you don't." Everybody agreed that that was right. It was sort of pitiful for Tony not to know he couldn't make a speech without saying that. Some tittered at his ignorance, so Tony said testily, "If all them that's going to cut the monkey had done cut it and threw it, we'll thank Brother Starks for a response." So Joe Starks and his cigar took the center of the floor. "I thank you all for your kind welcome and for extending to me the right hand of fellowship. I can see that this town is full of union and love. I mean to put my hands to the plow here and strain every nerve to make this our town the metropolis of the state. So maybe I better tell you in case you don't know that if we expect to move on, us got to incorporate like every other town. Us got to incorporate and us got to have a mayor if things is to be done and done right. I welcome y'all on behalf of me and my wife to this store and to the other things to come. Amen." Tony led the loud hand clapping and was out in the center of the floor when it stopped. "Brothers and sisters, since us can't never expect to better our choice, I move that we make Brother Starks our mayor until we can see further." "Second that motion." It was everybody talking at once, so there was no need of putting it to a vote. "And now we'll listen to a few words of encouragement from Mrs. Mayor Starks." The burst of applause was cut short by Joe taking the floor himself. "Thank you for your compliments, but my wife don't know nothing about no speech making. I never married her for nothing like that. She's a woman, and her place is in the home." Janie made her face laugh after a short pause, but it wasn't too easy. She had never thought of making a speech, and didn't know if she cared to make one at all. It must have been the way Joe spoke out without giving her a chance to say anything one way or another that took the bloom off of things. But anyway, she went down the road behind him that night, feeling cold. He strode along, invested with his new dignity, thought, and planned out loud, unconscious of her thoughts. "The mayor of a town like this can't lay around home too much. The place needs building up. Janie, I'll get hold of somebody to help out in the store, and you can look after things whilst I drum up things otherwise." "Oh, Jody, I can't do nothing with no stove lesson. You's there. I could maybe come in and help you when things get rushed, but, my God, I don't see how come you can't. There ain't nothing at all to hinder you if you got a thimbleful of sense. You got to. I got too much else on my hands as mayor. This town needs some light right now. Uh-huh. It is a little dark right along here. Of course it is. There ain't no use in scuffling over all these stumps and roots in the dark. I'll call a meeting about the dark and the roots right away. I'll sit on this case first thing. The very next day, with money out of his own pocket, he sent off to see his Roebuck and Company for the street lamp and told the town to meet the following Thursday night to vote on it. Nobody had ever thought of street lamps, and some of them said it was a useless notion. They went so far as to vote against it, but the majority ruled. But the whole town got vain over it after it came. That was because the mayor didn't just take it out of the crate and stick it up on a post. He unwrapped it and had it wiped off carefully and put it up on a showcase for a week for everybody to see. Then he set a time for the lighting and sent word all around Orange County for one and all to come to the lamp lighting. He sent men out to the swamp to cut the finest and the straightest cypress posts they could find, and kept on sending them back to hunt another one until they found one that pleased him. He had talked to the people already about the hospitality of the occasion. You all know we can't invite people to our town just dry along so. God, no. We got to feed 'em something, and 'tain't nothing people likes better than barbecue. I'll get one whole hog my own self. Seem like all the rest of y'all put together ought to be able to scrape up 2 more. Tell your women folks to do round about some pies and cakes and sweet potato pone. That's the way it went, too. The women got together the sweets, and the men looked after the meats. The day before the lighting, they dug a big hole in back of the store and filled it full of oak wood and burned it down to a glowing bed of coals. It took them the whole night to barbecue the 3 hogs. Hambo and Pearson had full charge while the others helped out with turning the meat now and then, while Hambo swabbed it all over with the sauce. In between times, they told stories, laughed and told more stories, and sung songs. They cut all sorts of capers and whiffed the meat as it slowly came to perfection with the seasoning penetrating to the bone. The younger boys had to rig up the sawhorses with boards for the women to use as tables. Then it was after sunup, and everybody not needed went home to rest up for the feast. By 5 o'clock, the town was full of every kind of a vehicle and swarming with people. They wanted to see that lamp lit at dusk. Near the time, Joe assembled everybody in the street before the store and made a speech. Folkses, the sun is going down. The Sunmaker brings it up in the morning, and the Sunmaker sends it to bed at night. Us poor weak humans can't do nothing to hurry it up, nor to slow it down. All we can do, if we want any light after the setting or before the rising, is to make some light ourselves. So that's how come lamps was made. This evening, we's all assembled here to light a lamp. This occasion is something for us all to remember to our dying day. The first street lamp in a colored town. Lift your eyes and gaze on it. And when I touch the match to that lamp wick, let the light penetrate inside of you. And let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Brother Davis, lead us in a word of prayer. Ask a blessing on this town in a most particular manner. While Davis chanted a traditional prayer poem with his own variations, Joe mounted the box that had been placed for the purpose and opened the brazen door of the lamp. As the word Amen was said, he touched the lighted match to the wick, and Mrs. Bogle's alto burst out in, We'll walk in the light, the beautiful light, mercies shine bright, shine all around us by day and by night. Jesus, the light of the world. They, all of them, all of the people took it up and sang it over and over till it was wrung dry and no further innovations of tone and tempo were conceivable. Then they hushed and ate barbecue. When it was all over, that night in bed, Jody asked Janie, "Well, honey, how you like being Mrs. Mayor?" "It's all right, I reckon. But don't you think it keeps us in a kind of strain?" "Strain? You mean the cooking and waiting on folks?" "No, Jody. It just looks like it keeps us in some way we ain't natural with one another. You's always off talking and fixing things, and I feels like I'm just marking time. Hope it soon gets over." "Over, Janie? My God, I ain't even started good. I told you in the very first beginning that I aim to be a big voice. You ought to be glad, 'cause that makes a big woman out of you." A feeling of coldness and fear took hold of her. She felt far away from things and lonely. Janie soon began to feel the impact of awe and envy against her sensibilities. The wife of the mayor was not just another woman as she had supposed. She slept with authority, and so she was part of it in the town mind. She couldn't get but so close to most of them in spirit. It was especially noticeable after Joe had forced through a town ditch to drain the street in front of the store. They had murmured hotly about slavery being over, but every man filled his assignment. There was something about Joe Starks that cowed the town. It was not because of physical fear. He was no fist fighter. His bulk was not even imposing as men go. Neither was it because he was more literate than the rest. Something else made men give way before him. He had a bow-down command in his face, and every step he took made the thing more tangible. Take, for instance, that new house of his. It had 2 stories, with porches, with banisters and such things. The rest of the town looked like servants' quarters surrounding the big house. And different from everybody else in the town, he put off moving in until it had been painted in and out. And look at the way he painted it, a glowy, sparkly white, the kind of promenading white that the houses of Bishop Whipple, W.B. Jackson, and the Vanderpool's wore. It made the village feel funny talking to him, just like he was anybody else. Then there was the matter of the spittoons. No sooner was he all set as the mayor, postmaster, landlord, storekeeper than he bought a desk like Mr. Hill or Mr. Galloway over in Maitland, with one of those swing-around chairs to it. What with him biting down on cigars and saving his breath on talk and swinging around in that chair, it weakened people. And then he spit in that gold-looking vase that anybody else would have been glad to put on their front room table. Said it was a spittoon, just like his used-to-be boss man used to have in his bank up there in Atlanta. Didn't have to get up and go to the door every time he had to spit. Didn't spit on his floor neither. Had that golded-up spitting pot right handy. But he went further than that. He bought a little lady-sized spitting pot for Janie to spit in. Had it right in the parlor with little sprigs of flowers painted all around the sides. It took people by surprise because most of the women dipped snuff and, of course, had a spit cup in the house. But how could they know up-to-date folks were spitting in flowery little things like that? It sort of made the rest of them feel that they had been taken advantage of, like things had been kept from them. Maybe more things in the world besides spitting pots had been